Welcome back, everybody. Today I thought I would share a little bit of information about deployment, and it's not going to be a by the letter beginner's guide like all the rules, etc. We're going to go through a actual deployment example, and what I'm hoping is that this is going to make things clearer for brand new players. That is, this video is targeted towards brand new players. And if you're an experienced player, then you can pitch in, help out a new player by commenting and sharing your deployment advice, or by correcting my deployment advice, or, you know, letting people know what I missed. But either way, my army's on the bottom here. This is a Cities of Sigmar army. On the top is a Seraphon army. Now, I don't know how to deploy Seraphon, so they just have kind of a, this is a deployment I think my friend used against me a while back, but that's not the big focus here. Right now, the focus is going to be on how can you deploy to maximize your strategies and to not get crushed. And so that's what we're hoping to do. And you'll start to learn as you play more games what feels good, what doesn't. You'll start to learn other armies, and that's all going to affect how you deploy. But at the base level, you need to have an idea of how you want to deploy and have a default deployment that you can use in a lot of different maps, so that you don't get stuck making the wrong call and losing the game. So in this deployment, we have several things going on. The first of which is that on the left flank, we have Wilder Corp Hunters, and on the right flank, we have Steel Helms. And this is one of the first points that we'll bring up, is that I've deployed for a battle tactic. My plan is to take the flanks. I'm going to be able to do that because the Wilder Corp Hunters have a 5-inch move during deployment to move up to here, and then on my turn they could move over the line. In the case of the Steel Helms, I would use a command point to auto run them 6 inches plus their 5-inch move, and I would put them over the line. That would be my call. That's just a turn 1 tactic that's pretty easy to do. Depending on what my opponent is doing, Seize the Center is also there if I get the first turn, but it's a really matchup dependent tactic because you don't necessarily want to expose your castle, which is all of my units in the middle here. So all these units are bunched up. We're calling that a castle, and because we have walls, we have, you know, not cannons, but we have hammers, and we are going to try to protect those hammers so that they can go and attack. So the idea here is that I have the CC, the Command Corp, the Free Guild Command Corp, which is a 6 model unit. They're pretty flexible with coherency because they're 6 models, and they can shape up in this T shape. And the T shape is really cool because if they die, I can be very selective in how I pick models away from them. So I can take away models that do less damage, or I can take away the front models and take them out of combat if possible. And that would allow me to restore them back to life with one of the artifacts that we have in Cities of Sigmar. It also allows my little foot marshal down here to give a 5+ ward to the command corps without actually being in risk of getting into combat himself, because if he dies, that is a big problem. There is a weakness with this list, and that's that I don't have a lot shored up through the middle there. Ideally, I would have some other unit that could share the brunt here in the middle. So basically the Command Corps and the Steel Helms or something, and then they would be able to really shore up my walls. I don't have access to that with the points right now. So right now, this is what I'm trying. I'm also trying to stick to the same list for a little while so that I can learn what I like and what I don't like. So even though I've played a game with this list already and I have an idea of what I'd like to change, I am going to give it a few more games before I make any final decisions. Okay, so on to the rest of my deployment here. I have the Free Guild Cavaliers right here, and I have the Free Guild Fusiliers on the left, and both of them are just on these 2 objectives. And what that allows me to do is control those objectives at the start of the battle round. And that means that I can move off of them, or on my turn that I'll score them, and I don't have to stay on them. If I were to deploy closer in, which I might do if I didn't actually have objectives, if it was a different map, You know, maybe instead of stake a claim, it was shifting priorities. Maybe I would deploy like really close like this to make it even harder to get to my hammers and to get to my units. But because it's stake a claim, I want to make sure I'm actually towing in on these objectives. If I don't do that on my first turn, if I want to score those objectives, I will have to go ahead and use up my movement to get on there and wait on there. So at the end of the turn, I am controlling the objective. And so it's often a lot easier just to keep your unit, deploy it to be like just even one sliver of one model onto that objective. Sometimes you might choose not to do that. And that would be to make it easier to get the attack on two fronts tactic. So for example, if I left my Fusiliers all off of that, and then my opponent like came and seized the center or something, then I might say, okay, I'm going to attack on two fronts, where I take one objective and then I try to take a second objective that was controlled by my opponent. So that's kind of niche application. Some people might do that. Depends on what your opponent's lining up like in the matchup. So another thing that I've done here is I've protected all of my heroes. So they're all behind a bunch of different models. My Foot Marshal is right over here by the Command Core. The Rune Lord is behind the hammers. My Alchemite Warforger is at the back here. And then the Fusel Major is also behind the Free Guild Fusiliers. And that's where I want them to be for a couple of reasons. One, if for my Alchemite Warforger, he is actually out of Unbind range. If he was going to be tried, like if I try to cast a spell with him, my opponent will not be able to unbind me on that first turn if I'm the one going first, because they will be out of range of me no matter who they use. Now, that means I'm possibly going to be out of range of them unless I move up, but I think it's better not to get unbound when you're going first, because you might want to get a very important spell off to help yourself survive. I'm also keeping all of my heroes centrally located, because then I can apply buffs. So for example, with my Foot Marshal, he has an 18-inch buff where he can deploy his Relic Envoy, and that's going to go onto the Free Guild Cavaliers, which will allow them to work as a lone unit without a hero to buff them. But also I might have other spells or prayers that would have maybe a 12-inch buffer. And in that case, if I wanted to cast a 3d6 charge on my Cavaliers, I would actually need to deploy with my Alchemite Warforger able to provide that buff. The same thing goes for the prayers, and also all the orders that I might give out, they all need to be within 12 inches. And if I deploy outside of 12 inches, all of a sudden I start my first turn and it's not the movement phase yet, and I'm already unable to do one of the things I planned. So at the bare minimum, one of the things you've got to do in deployment is make sure you know the range of your buffs, who you preferably would like to cast them on, and that your deployment accounts for everybody being within the range of those buffs. So for example, on my first turn, I would probably cast the 3d6 charge spell onto my hammers. And I say that because I don't own any manifestations. Otherwise, I might cast a manifestation. I would probably start to build up some points with my Rune Lord by chanting a prayer, and I would give out a Relic Envoy over to my Free Guild Cavaliers, and everybody else has a hero near them, and so they'd all be good to go. So another thing to think about with this army or this deployment is, can my opponent deep strike me? Which is where they put a unit into reserves and then they call them out and deploy them onto my side of the field, or wherever really. But in the case of this deployment, and without owning any manifestations, I'm actually in a tough spot for deep strike in a way. So let's say I do go first. What would happen here is my Steel Helms go up, my Wildercorp Hunters go up, I score my battle tactic, maybe I'm moving up a little bit. I don't know if I would take the objective or not. Depends on who I'm playing and how aggressive they are. But whatever it is, like I'm going to move my castle forward, possibly not. And at this point, my opponent can deep strike me on, and this is a 9-inch ruler that I have that I'm moving around, on either side. It's really easy for them to do. They probably, well, maybe could do it in the middle here. I don't know. They could definitely do it on the center objective. And so I would definitely be weak to a deep strike. The way to counter that would be with using your flank units to prevent them from deep striking, maybe foregoing a battle tactic and just making sure that you're able to deal, like to zone out any deep strikes by making there be no available 9-inch spaces on your side of the field. This is really hard to do without manifestations, especially when you're a castle army and you really want to keep your units together. So it is what it is. It's something that I'm still working on myself, but I thought I'd mention it in case it helps. So let's say I've gone first. I've scored take the flanks, and I've played maybe a little bit safe here to make sure that I don't get totally whacked by my opponent. If my opponent decided to come straight down the middle and attack my castle, then the idea here is that the command corps will hold them off, and then I would either countercharge or on my turn, charge my hammers right into whatever they tried to kill my guys with. The command corps are surprisingly tanky, and so they could hold up. The thing is that there's big gaps here for people to pile in past them, possibly. Well, you know, it depends on how they charged, how big a roll they got, where they actually get in. For example, if they moved up and like got in this little nook here, that wouldn't be ideal. It's possible. But my hammers are safe to essentially just have a big swing back the next turn and wipe out whoever's there. If my opponent instead came down and attacked my Free Guild Fusiliers, I would still be in a position where, again, my hammers could come out the next turn and defend them. And then similarly, if they went after my Free Guild Cavaliers, my hammers could then go over to the side and they could fight over there as well. And this is what happened when I played my first game with this formation. I was able to pull off that attack. Like, I was able to protect my hammers, and then my opponent really was in trouble because their hammers had kind of not really taken care of my Cavaliers. That's who they decided to pin down, my Cavaliers, and they also sent a force right down my middle against the command corps, and they were not expecting the command corps to hold up, but they actually did, because the command corps, and in general for cities, if you take a certain battle formation, you're going to be -1 to wound. When you attack the Free Guild Fusiliers, they're also going to be -1 to rend because of their fortified position. And then we have things like the Alchemite Warforger giving +1 to save, and your other defensive buffs that you might apply. And you end up being very tanky in that first battle round. It's actually pretty easy to weather the storm and to counter-strike back at your opponent, as long as you keep those hammers, in this case literally called hammerers, safe, then you can strike back. Now, this formation, I don't want to take full credit for it, because the concept of it, the T-shape thing, I learned that all on the AOS Coach Discord from the really talented players on the Cities of Sigmar channel. And so it's something that I saw there. I kind of amended it a little bit because my list is a bit different from what they were suggesting. And then I built out this. I tried it recently. I won a game with it. It was pretty fun. But I definitely think the middle is a little bit weak. Now, what's cool here is if I do take the flanks and my opponent says, well, I'm going to go take out, you know, whatever you have on the flanks, let's say, that still actually gives me a lot of space to do a few things. For one, it's actually still very easy for the Cavaliers to then get a charge in the next turn if I wanted to. The Fusiliers can advance in formation and take shots at people. If I lose or have like a lot of damage to my flank units, that still protects my castle and allows me to move on my own terms. And this is all with Callous and Toll still in Deep Strike in the bottom corner here. Okay, so that's it for this little deployment demo. The idea here is that you want to stay within your buff ranges, protect your hammers, have a turn 1 plan for a battle tactic, and sometimes that might actually be not taking a battle tactic, but often, even if you don't take one, you want to know that you can take one. One of the most common things is that if you don't deploy for a battle tactic, you'll realize that your units aren't in the position to move into one anyway, and then you've lost 4 points. You want to check your Unbind ranges. So maybe you can leave your wizards out of Unbind range. And you also want to think about tagging objectives and also zoning out any deep strikes, if at all that is possible for your army, so that you don't get attacked from the side or attacked from behind. And again, for me, that wouldn't be the biggest deal in the world, because if I did get attacked on either side, my hammers are still protected in the middle and able to go help out wherever they are needed. So that's it. Let me know what you thought about the video, if you have any questions, and if you have advice or corrections, you can share those as well. Otherwise, I'll see you all again soon enough in another video.